All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar event. My name is Joshua, and I'm going to be your presenter today. My computer says 1 minute before 1. My phone says something else entirely different. Just kind of split the difference here. So we're not going to get started on our topic here for another, 60 or 90 seconds. So a few things before we get started. I'm going to work till 20 minutes after at the very latest because that's our scheduled time for the webinar. I will be happy to stick around and try to answer questions for you that may or may not be answered during the event. I may not be able to answer your question, not because I don't want to, but because maybe it's something specific to your data. So I may ask you to contact technical support when you can be at the computer where Church Windows or Payroll is installed, so we can get some more of our questions answered and try to answer the question for you more intelligently. Also, please keep your questions topical. I'm not equipped either with data or in terms of my mindset, perhaps to answer another question about another portion of the software for you. And if you do have questions for me, please type those in the questions portion of the webinar. We do keep everybody muted, but you can type those questions in there, and I'll try to keep an eye on those. I'll try to also then repeat the question for everyone's benefit, and we'll see what we can't do to get that question answered. So we're here to talk about payroll mid-year W-2 checkup. It is never too early to begin looking or anticipating problems with Church Windows Payroll. Okay, how I like to look at it is, depending on what we find is wrong, and unfortunately we're not going to be able to I can point out a couple things that we might detect are wrong, but there's so many ways that payroll and a compensation agreement with any employee, and most specifically pastors, can be set up that I can't necessarily point to one specific problem, but I can point you to some tools that may help you determine where a problem may come from. But as I like to say, if an adjustment that I need to make to an employee's record due to a problem with the setup needs to be made, and that adjustment affects my 941, I'd rather try to submit fewer 941Xs or amended forms for previous quarters than more. So if I need to submit, it's easier for me to submit one 941X than it is for me to submit 3 when I realize a problem occurs at the end of the year. So you can help yourself by trying to determine and locate and find these problems. And this is particularly true, especially since we're now approaching the end of the second quarter for 2016. Okay? So for those of you that may be new to payroll in its entirety, we can find our W-2 forms by going under reports here, right up here to tax reports, and right here we've got a whole slew of tax reports, but we're going to our W-2 forms. It then reveals all of our employees that have pay in the current year, so we're going to leave all of those, and we're simply going to go to next. It's going to ask us, do we want to do the file copy or government copy? Well, this is just for us to review, so we're going to leave it as file copy. Okay? We're just reviewing them, and we're going to click next. So then it opens our copy D, basically for employer, for our W-2 forms for 2016. Now, one of the things I like to point out right away is your Payroll 2016 version of Payroll installed the 2015 form for W-2s. Okay, disregard this. That doesn't matter. We're not concerned with what year's on the form. When you receive your Payroll 2016 or 17 update, that will include the new 2016 W-2s for the current year. Okay? Again, we're not concerned with what year's on the report. We're only concerned with the information that appears on the report. Okay? So what we're really here to look at is the information that occurs right here at the top. Okay? Right here in these sections right here. Okay? So, what we're wanting to look at is, just a kind of a few things again to look at is looking at our box 1 wages. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit here. Box 1 wages, federal taxable compensation tips, and other compensation. Okay. Social Security and Medicare wages, state and local wages. Okay. are the amounts of the taxable earnings that we're reporting for our federal, state, or local, if state and local are applicable to you, correct? Okay? So, again, just by way of an example of what you can look at is, here we are looking at Larry, our senior pastor, Larry Higgins, okay? He's an ordained member of ordained clergyman, so clergy person. So he doesn't pay in Social Security, Medicare, and FICA. So we notice here Social Security wages, Medicare wages, Social Security taxes withheld, and Medicare taxes withheld. Social Security tips are blank. That is correct for the pastor. If you come in and you look at your W-2 for your minister and you're seeing that there is Social Security wages or Social Security taxes withheld, that's a red flag that we've got something for our pastor set up improperly. Okay? If we go down to our next person, Jimmy, he is a lay person, not clergy, and he does have Social Security wages and Medicare wages, Social Security amounts withheld. Okay? So that might be clue number one, that we don't have a minister set up properly, is there Social Security wages or withheld amounts showing up? Okay? Also, under our box 14, are we seeing housing allowance or any other reportable allowances for our ministers showing up here correctly? So clearly we see housing allowance and an automobile reimbursement that we've determined should be showing up in box 14, that in most cases is not being included as part of our taxable compensation, but it does need to be reported. Okay? In addition to that, are there any other items that should be appearing, whether they're allowances or deductions, that should be appearing in our box 12 lines, A, B, C, or D, with an appropriate code? Implying there may be a pension or retirement contribution, okay, that's being contributed to or paid into. Maybe there's a, flex spending or health spending account, for medical purposes that's being set up that needs to be reported. I don't know if these are what your employees are paying into, but we want to make sure, and that's the reason why we're checking these now, is to determine and anticipate and fix any problems before we get to the end of the year. Again, that may wind up affecting not only the W-2, but perhaps our 941 as well. Okay? Payroll, if we use Jimmy as our example as opposed to our, Pastor Larry here, he's not having any taxes withheld for anything. So he's not a good example of that. But if we go down to Jimmy, our custodian and part-time organist, federal income tax, Social Security, Medicare, state and local are only going to show the amount of taxes that have actually been withheld from that employee's pay for the year, unless we've gone in and made an adjustment to those. Okay? If those are the amount of taxes that have been withheld, we're generally not going to touch those because it's what's happened in reality. So if we realize, there's a withholding amount that's wrong, then we need to go out and figure out why else it's occurring. Maybe we don't have something set up correct with regards to a taxable status for a deduction or something like that. Okay? Maybe it's something with need to go back and review the W-4 form for the employee. So, if we revisit that W-4 form, we want to go back into employee file, data setup, find the appropriate employee, maybe click the federal tab at the bottom. Do we have used tax tables checked? How many exemptions are they claiming? Have they specified an additional amount or percent to be withheld for federal tax, in addition to maybe what the tax tables are automatically withholding each and every time? Okay. I mean, folks, you'd be surprised at how many times, I'll get a call from folks and, that they're basically saying, hey, here it is in, June of 2016, an employee came to me and said, hey, why am I not having any federal taxes withheld from my paycheck? Okay. Well, there could be any number of factors that are contributing to that, but it's taken them 6 months to actually look at their pay stub and determine that there's no taxes withheld. So you'd be surprised at how many how many of us actually don't look at our pay stubs and are not paying attention to those. So, use the information that's in the system. Also here under things like our deductions tab. I was working with a user on a support call earlier today about deductions that they were looking at. Look at these year-to-date totals. So here we see clearly for Jimmy, he's paid in $420 year-to-date for his health insurance contribution. Okay? There are helpful information fields here that can do this. We also have one under our allowances tab too. So if I click on allowances and I go back up to Larry here, it shows us not only how much is being paid to him for his housing and automobile reimbursement allowance, but it also shows how much has been paid for the year. You also do have your totals tab right here as well that shows us our W-2, notice right here, W-2 and 941 totals right at the very top. So it shows the whole year, and then below that it breaks it down by quarter. So as I continue to scroll down, it shows first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, we're not in the third quarter, and fourth quarter. Generally, these are going to be really remarkably consistent. So notice here for our first quarter, for Larry, we paid him $71.67 in federal reported wages for both the first and the second quarter. Those consistency numbers will often kind of point you to whether there is an issue or not. Okay? If you're going in here and looking at those and you're going, well, wait a minute, why is my first quarter showing a different total than my second quarter? Again, you're paying attention. You're looking at these. You can go in, and then we might need to go over and look at some other payroll reports to look and see if we can try to narrow down where the problem began. Okay? If we determine, the problem could be, folks, and I'm stressing could be fixed as easily as by going into, say, something like our deductions file or our allowances file and simply putting in a check mark in the W-2 box or unchecking it, depending on whether it should or should not be put into or not be showing in a separate W-2 box. Okay? We can say, okay, our health insurance deduction should be showing up in a different box. Well, I can come in here and simply check that box and choose the appropriate box number and code letter, and that'll put it into the box. It won't change where it reports for wages, but the problem could be fixed that easily, depending on what you find is wrong. Okay? If we determine that it isn't that easy, we do have, maybe we need to go in and correct wages based on something is being reported. With that being said, I'm sorry, I closed out of our deductions or our allowances window too prematurely. You may also find that something is not set up right here under include in W-2 wages or taxable status, as the case may be, depending on what it is. The term include in W-2 wages is synonymous with the term taxable. So we notice here for our housing allowance, nothing is checked. So what we're saying here is that the housing allowance for the pastor should be showing separately in W-2 box 14, but it is not to be taxable or reported for federal earnings, Social Security, Medicare, state, or local. Okay? Going in and checking or unchecking these boxes is not retroactive. What I mean is it won't go back and change the status of that taxable status of an allowance or deduction for past pays. We're only saying we're only changing it for future pays. So what that means is you may need to go into payroll right here under calculate adjustment and calculate an adjustment to correct something that's misreporting on either the W-2 and or the 941. Again, I can't point out specifics, folks, for you because it could be any number of things. Wages are the first thing that comes to mind. Oh, I've got something set up as taxable for or reportable for housing for the federal wages for the pastor, and it shouldn't have been. Well, we would go, I'm sorry, calculate adjustment right up here, calculate adjustment. Okay? That's what that feature is for. It allows us to make a change to the current reported payroll figures without generating a check for the purposes of correction. Okay? So we go, okay, calculate adjustment, warning, a check will not be created. Great, no money's changing hands here. We enter the adjustment date, so we're going to make that, 6/29. We go to next. We choose, say, the one employee we're wanting to correct. Generally, most adjustments, I go right to next, and I'm going down here to browse, and I'd say, my gross taxable for Larry was that my federal wages were being misreported by $2,000. So I would put in, we said the housing allowance was taxable. It's not. I'm just using an arbitrary figure here. And I can simply put in the amount that I'm wanting to adjust the current reported figure by. And then I would simply post that. Okay? Not transferring it to accounting. Okay? So now I basically said I've reduced my federal and state wages for Larry by $2,000. But what has that also done? It's also adjusted my wages, reported wages for my 941. So depending on what that's affixed or affected, I need to be careful. Depending on the date of my adjustment, I may need to go back and change or submit a 941X. Okay, so with about 3 minutes left, I also want to point out here under reports, the most useful report for helping you compare or examine and utilize 940 or the W-2 figures to compare them and see if they're right is our history report. This is personally one of my favorite reports in accounting, or in payroll, excuse me. Either any one of them, but the one that offers the most detail is the one here at the bottom called Federal Taxable Earnings, Withholdings, and Net Pay Detail. And that is literally as it's described. We go to next. I'm going to leave it as everybody. Go to next. It defaults to the whole year. I want to print a separate report for each individual employee, so I'm going to change it down to individual history report, and I simply click next. And what that does is it creates, in this case, 10 separate reports, page 1 of 10. So I've got 10 employees who I've paid throughout the year. So let's zoom in on that a little bit and maximize it here. So one of the things that I like to point out about this report is, again, we notice there is, enormous consistency in most cases to employees' pay, unless they're hourly. But notice here, Larry's received, $1,315 of gross pay every paycheck, other than our adjustment. His non-taxable deductions, his federal taxable compensation, everything is ridiculously consistent. How much state taxes has been withheld, how much local tax. Generally, if you use this report, you can come in here and see even our net check amounts are consistent. Generally, if we see something that's changed, we're either going to see an asterisk next to the pay date implying that the status of a deduction or allowance has changed, or we're going to be able to look at these figures and we're going to be able to see, hey, what's changing. So if I come in here and I go, well, wait a minute, what's this negative $2,000? That's going to raise some red flags for me. So I would then simply go to the next page and I would do the same thing. Now we're looking at employee in the case of somebody like Jimmy, who is part-time, and his hours do change. So notice there isn't a level of consistency here in terms of that. This might become a little more tricky, but certainly there is still some consistency to the pay here. If we notice here, let me grab my highlighter, non-taxable deductions. Again, all the same. Okay? Yeah, federal taxes withheld are different based on their gross pay. But let's scroll even further right here. Let me get back to my normal drawing tool. No non-taxable, taxable deductions. This one you might need to kind of pick apart, employee you might need to pick apart and cross-reference with your records. But this report is the one that I will use most frequency to kind of look and examine to see where we can find any inconsistencies that may be occurring in an employee's pay. I love this report. The difference between this one and one of the other history reports is this literally does break it down by pay, per pay period. If I go into my other history reports like employee or payroll history report, it breaks it down by quarter. Still can break it down by individual employee, but notice it's broken down by month and then by quarter. Okay? And it's kind of formatted a little differently. Gross pay amounts, taxes withheld, deductions, allowances, what have you. So utilize what's in the system, folks, to help you figure out what's wrong. All right, so we're at 20 minutes. I'm done with what I'm talking about. I hope these have kind of pointed you to to some things that will help you examine your W-2s. Again, I don't expect them to answer all of this, to answer all of your questions for you. But if you do, you're at least looking now to try to anticipate those problems in advance. And if you have other questions about it, our support staff are always available and happy to help. Our toll-free number, of course, is 800-533-5227. And if you have any questions that are specific to your data, please let us know. We're happy to help. So if you do have questions, please type those in there for me now. And if not, thank you very much for attending. We hope it's been helpful, and we look forward to seeing you at another Church Windows User Group webinar event. You're welcome. Thank you. All right, it seems like folks are diving out pretty quickly here. I don't know if either I've been really thorough with this or folks are just unsure based on what they're seeing. But again, we hope it's been helpful. I don't know if somebody's typing in questions to me. I'm going to give folks here another 30 seconds or so to see if they're typing in something for me. Well, it looks like folks are darting out pretty quickly here. So I'll go ahead and end the webinar for everybody. Again, a recording of this event will be on our website here between now and the end of the business day on Friday. And again, we hope to see you at another event. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.